My name is Carol Savage and I'm a writer based in Nottingham. I've been writing for 20 years and now I've turned my hand to writing screenplays. I work part-time for an agency called Nottingham Domestic Violence Forum, and they go into schools to educate children about domestic violence. I've written 1 feature film and 6 shorts, and they all deal with different aspects of domestic violence. And there are different aspects to domestic violence. There is obviously the violence, the physical violence, there is financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, which is a huge problem, and there is sexual abuse. So each short is a different story about those different aspects. The short Terms of Love deals with emotional and physical abuse. This young woman, she was a student, very bright, and she'd met this guy, and he started out, and this is a typical example of how domestic violence happens. She started out, this is why I feel so passionate, because we have such we don't understand what it is and how it happens. But he started out how he adored her. He loved her so much, he'd do anything for her. He just wanted to be with her all the time. And, you know, obviously she started to fall in love with him. And then he insisted on moving in with her. He couldn't bear to be without her. He moved into her home. And then the abuse started. And it started out by, and this is how it usually starts, by putting people down, making women feel stupid, trivialising them, criticising what they're saying, until they sort of lose their identity. And then after, some abusive men, and not all men are abusive, of course, but abusive men, not all of them use violence. They don't need to. The intimidation, the threats is enough. And I just feel so outraged by all this lack of understanding. That's what my main thing is to create an awareness of what domestic violence actually is. Surely the main question, the first question that should come to our minds should be not why does she put up with it, but why is he doing it? What is in his psyche? We do know that it's all about power and control. The other reason that I wrote the short, this particular short about a young woman rather than about a family woman, was because domestic violence is very much on the increase. It is now happening, and listen to this for a statistic, it is now happening to 1 in 5 young women. And young women themselves often believe that it is right for her partner to treat her like this, hit her or put her down if she has stepped out of line, which interpret that as is not doing as she's told. Well, the storyline is, as I say, a young student who meets this really flash, really good-looking older man. He's probably about 25, she's 19, and he adores her. He adores her, he's madly in love with her, he says, and they're together for a while, and then she's still at uni and she thinks she'd like him to meet her friends, who are university friends, and they're all acting up in a bar, and this is where you first see the signs of the control. It's not shown it so far, but this is, you know, after probably a year, it starts to rear its ugly head. And so everything's all right again for a while, and then she moves in with him. He really wants her to move in and be part of his life. She isn't so sure, but, you know, he seems to love her so much. And so she moves in, and then she says she would really love to go back to university. There's also, with domestic violence, there's a lot of isolation, keeping women away from their friends and family and keeping them like in a box. And this was his idea, and he wanted to keep her in a box for himself. During this time, the young woman, whose name is Jess, has been getting more and more insecure, intimidated, lost her identity, is starting to cut. So she's very, very unhappy. But at this point, she's got no ID. She feels part of him and she's frightened of him. And she feels like she can't get away. And rightly so, because with domestic violence, even when women try and leave, and this is part of the reason why they stay, there's lots of reasons why women stay, which we don't have time to go into. But fear is a huge thing because they know very well that they will come looking for them and there will be trouble. Bang Productions, who are based in Broadway Cinema in Nottingham, have shown interest in it and are helping me to produce it. And I'm really pleased to say that Holly Lucas, a BAFTA-nominated local Nottingham girl, is to act in the short. We're seeking £6,000 for the first film, and we've already got support from Nottingham Domestic Violence Forum, but we're looking for support from any charities, agencies that deal with domestic violence. We're also looking for support from the public, people who may have been touched by what they've heard today, people who may feel their hearts touched by what they've heard. There are 13 million recorded incidents of domestic violence every year in this country. 2 women a week are murdered by their current or former partners, and that accounts for 1/3 of all female victims, murder victims. Domestic violence costs this country £2.3 billion every year. 1 call is made to the police every minute reporting domestic violence. Domestic violence accounts for 16 to 24% of all reported violent crime. Domestic violence affects 1/4 of women in their lifetime. 54% of reported rapes are done by the woman's current or former partner. 9 out of 10 children see, hear, witness the domestic violence that is going on in the home. Imagine what that does to children, all ages. And children who witness domestic violence are more likely to suffer emotional or behavioural problems in later life. Through my work in a women's refuge, I heard the stories about the misery that women and children were put through, and I felt so compassionate towards them. I felt so sad for them. And I think this is why it's so important that we educate the public, and through what better way than through film. And this is why it's so important that we get this money to make these films, to raise this awareness, to stop the violence, to stop the misery for women and children, and make a better society for us all.